my first experience with a sexual situation was uncircumcised, and it just wasn't the easiest to handle. It wasn't the most hygienic, and all around wasn't the best experience for me personally. Hello, my name's Ruby Vuitton. I am 26 years old. I'm from Arizona, and I've been in the modeling adult industry for 8.5 years. And today is definitely a first for me, so I love that. We're gonna be talking about circumcision, kind of what it's done for, who it's done to, when it's done, and then what I know about it, as well as at the end, I'm gonna be looking at the pictures of 4 lovely members of DJP and guessing who is and who is not circumcised.
It's about to go down.
Based on like race, where they're born, age, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So stay tuned for that. But first I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. If I had to rate how familiar I am with circumcision on like a scale, I'd probably say at this point maybe a 6, because I've done a little research, but I've never really thought too deeply about it before. I just know like my preference and how I feel about it, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. But yeah, so maybe like a 6 out of 10. I'm definitely more familiar with circumcised. I've only had one uncircumcised boyfriend in the past, and I just remember thinking it felt like one of those water snakes. Like it's like a tube with liquid inside, and there's a hole in the middle, and it kind of flops around. That's kind of what I thought of it, and it wasn't necessarily my favorite because also the hygiene issue. Like if you are not circumcised, it tends to be, you need to take more steps to take care of yourself and your hygiene. And this is just a generalization, but some men are not very good about their hygiene. Oh my God. So that's kind of how I view it. I think that boyfriend I mentioned was the first time I ever learned about it, at least that I can consciously remember. And I didn't like think too much about it other than what I just said. But yeah, and if you aren't aware with what it is the removal of the foreskin around the shaft, and it's typically done at birth, but I guess it can be done as an adult, which is something I recently learned. And it's basically usually done for religious reasons, social reasons, health reasons, and that sort of thing. A lot of countries practice it, some don't. So this is actually interesting. Apparently Muslim countries tend to do it more, Jewish countries, and then Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So apparently in Australia, which is something I saw on a comment on another one of these videos, is that Australia is doing it less and less. So that's interesting. It's typically practiced in countries that are Muslim, Jewish, white, I don't know how to say that, and indigenous people sometimes do it as well. It's typically practiced in Jewish communities, Israel, US, Europe, Latin America, as a newborn, like on the 8th day is what I've found. Circumcision is typically practiced in Muslim countries where it is done in childhood, 5 to 12 years old typically, which would kind of suck. I would not like that. And then Jewish communities, so like Israel, the US, Europe, etc. And apparently Latin America doesn't typically do it unless it's in a Jewish community, so that was interesting. Christian communities, so in like Egypt, Philippines, and typically in childhood or adolescence. And then the US and Canada, obviously we definitely do it. That's typically in the first week of life, which would be my preference, you know, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. South Korea does it around 8 to 16 ever since being under the US influence. Circumcision is typically done in the US, where it's done in infancy, like newborn stage, as well as Canada. And then any Jewish community, Israel, the US, Europe, and I found this interesting, Latin America, which typically it doesn't really happen much there unless it's a Jewish community. And it's done on the 8th day of birth, and it's a whole religious like ceremony, I believe. And then Muslim countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and so on. And that's also soon after birth or childhood at like 5 to 12 years old, which again, we'll talk about in a bit, but if I was gonna do it, I would do it at childbirth. And I know that there's a whole debate on consent, but I just think you want to minimize the trauma as much as possible. That's my thought process on it. But it's also done in parts of Africa, and it's part of like the rite of passage into manhood. So that's interesting. I actually saw that on a show recently. It was a Jewish family having a party in this show called Glow on Netflix, and the boy was like really upset that he had to get circumcised, and they just put up like what are those things called? Like they fold out and they kind of cover you so you can change and stuff. And the whole family was in the room, so I thought that was funny. It's rare in Europe, Latin America, China, Japan, and India, as long as it's not the Muslim areas. So yeah, definitely very interesting. Why does the US practice? So the US practices circumcision for health reasons primarily, other than like the indigenous areas and the Christians, but it's typically for health reasons because it can actually, which is very interesting, prevent STIs and HIV and that sort of thing. Not like entirely, but the statistics show that it's less likely to get it if you are circumcised. So that's a huge plus to me in my eyes. And then also just like the hygiene thing. I'm personally for it. I'm for anything that helps make people's lives easier or safer. So that stance has never really changed. I've always been for it because my first experience with a sexual situation was uncircumcised, and it just wasn't the easiest to handle. It wasn't the most hygienic, and all around wasn't the best experience for me personally. So I definitely have my strong preference for that, and I definitely would have my own son circumcised at birth, and it would be just to help make his life easier and for hygiene reasons, because I'm big on that. And I mean, I don't think if I were a boy, I don't think I'd be mad at my parents for doing it at birth. I think I'd be grateful and happy, and maybe there are some that would feel opposite, but that's just my preference and that's just what I would do. So to each their own. And as far as my own family goes, I am not 100% sure. We haven't really talked about it, but I would assume that they are, like probably all of them, because I don't know, I didn't see anything about Catholic circumcision, but part of my family is Catholic, and I just feel like they would have done it, I guess. Maybe like, I don't know. That's just what I'm guessing based on intuition, but I have no idea, really. Yeah, I don't know. Circumcision is pretty common in the US, mainly in the Midwest, which is interesting. I think that's like the more religious area, so that's probably why. but it has been declining in recent years, and I think that has to do with insurance and whether it covers it or not, as well as like whether it's kind of pushed on you a little more or not socially. And I think that as a society, we've kind of stopped trusting the things we're told by certain people as much, if that makes sense. So it's definitely been declining over the years, and it looks like primarily in white newborns is what saw the largest drop. And it has to do with like the zip codes, like the areas they live in, the insurance coverage they have, and as well as if they kind of immigrated here or not, because obviously it's widely based on geography. So I found that very interesting. Okay, so now for the fun part, I'm gonna be looking at photos of 4 lovely men and guessing their circumcision status. So starting off, we have JP, who is Caucasian, 41 years old, and born in Texas. And I mean, looking at him, I would guess yes, but also because I have some context, I know he was born in Texas, which has a 80% circumcision rate. So I'm gonna guess he's part of the wider collective on that.
Okay.
And then we have DJ, who is 40 years old and Korean, born in Chicago. My intuition is telling me yes. So I'm gonna go with that. At first, I was gonna say no because of the fact that he's Korean, and I read that most of Asia doesn't really do it, but then I saw that South Korea now does it, so I'm not sure which side you're from, but I'm just gonna take a wild guess and say yes, you are.
Okay.
And then we have Miles, who I believe is, yes, 34, African American, and born in Southern California. And I'm also gonna guess yes because the rates were like around 60%. And this is just my intuition. I don't really have too much to base it, but I'm just gonna go with yes. He looks like he is.
I wanna go home. I wanna go home!
And we have Luis, Caucasian, 24, and born in Mexico. And for this one, I'm just gonna guess no because Mexico had some pretty low circumcision rates. I know, yeah, I mean, I just needed a no in there too. Yeah, the rate is 4%. Mexico City's a little bit higher at 23%, but that's pretty low. So I'm gonna guess no, he's not. And yeah, I hope I'm right because I'm always right. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting diving into this topic, and I feel like I know a lot more than I did before, and I feel even stronger in the decision of doing it at childbirth if I ever have a son. So thank you.